As soon as you realize that you are not going to die if that person isn't in your life, you are free. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, how the hell do you be a compassionate person without being manipulated yourself? Yeah, kind of a hard one to learn and grasp. Implement into your life the right way, and it takes a lot of trial and error. And one thing that you will have to be ready for is pain. You can't be fearful of pain and failing and getting hurt to separate someone else's pain from our own, and to be able to be very compassionate towards that person, but it not take anything off of our own plate. And that is a skill that you have to learn. The key to remaining empathetic without being manipulated is balance. Trusting yourself, knowing yourself, and a lot of self-love. If you haven't watched my self-love video, you can find it somewhere. I'll also put it in the description box. But the reason why everyone and their fucking moms talks about self-love, the reason why I always bring up self-love is because it is the key to like everything. It is a really simple term to use when you mean having maturity and knowledge and trust within the universe and therefore yourself, not living out of fear and living out of love. And one of the skills that you'll begin to learn through self-love is emotional vulnerability without being manipulated. I'm going to ask you now to think of one person in your life who reminds you of someone who is way too vulnerable and super unguarded, is always getting hurt, always putting others' feelings before theirs. And now think of someone who's entirely on the opposite side of the spectrum, super avoidant, doesn't ever know what they're feeling, or if they do, they always avoid it. Seems to lack empathy for most people. And think about what you notice about both of them. And I'm willing to bet that the common denominator is always fear. Vulnerability, when unguarded, risks exploitation. When it's suppressed, it breeds isolation. And one misstep in either direction can leave us either very manipulated or estranged from our own humanity. And as someone who used to be a lot more on the avoidant side, it's really easy to kind of get ego caught up in it, because when you are avoidant, a lot of people will fall to your knees. They will become anxious around you and crave to need you. And that's what avoidants actually really love. They really hate when other people need them, but there's this really satisfying comfort in knowing that someone needs you more than you need them. And that's the whole thing with avoidance. You want a surplus of emotional vulnerability that is given to you without you having to give it back or receive any of the consequences. And for a little bit, it kind of seems like you're God and you're kind of put on top. You're the king of everyone's hearts and no one can touch yours. And there's nothing more appealing to an anxious person, or maybe another avoidant, who is able to crack that other avoidant and to kind of peel them away and be like, oh look, I got you to feel. And as someone who used to play that game and get that really quick dopamine and sense of security from being able to crack someone open, or be able to withdraw and stay pretty avoidant towards someone who was trying to give me love so I could remain on top, as fucked up as that sounds, it all still came from a place of not trusting myself and just a place of fear. And there are lots of days where I still struggle with that, but I know that I'm pretty young and I actively always try to look at that, especially with my external relationships around me. I try to instead lead with love, because the people I have now surrounded myself with always deserve vulnerability from me, and they always deserve that extra patience and emotional maturity that it takes to not fall back into unhealthy habits. And you know who deserves it the most is me. I think there comes a point in some avoidance life where they realize that this feeling of being king of everyone's hearts isn't as grand as they think it is, because it means that they can't feel their own heart. Really being closed off to vulnerability is just a reflection back onto yourself and how vulnerable you're willing to be with yourself. And eventually, and hopefully, you'll start to realize that it really dampens your own spirit. And the only person that's really being manipulated in this game is you. That can be a really hard thing to come out of, especially if you've made being avoidant kind of your identity, being detached and not able to commit. And I think there is something to be said about being picky and not just opening your heart to everyone, because not everyone deserves that. But that's where this balance comes in. This is where the self-trust with yourself comes in, and being able to know exactly when to do that and when to detach. Detachment in non-avoidant sense is very good for you, and it can be really, really healthy, but a lot of people don't really know what detachment means. It's not turning off your emotions and turning a blind eye. It's being able to look at something for how it is, however painful, however destructive it may be, and look at it and then float away and still be able to see it and still be able to acknowledge it, but have that power and the self-love and the self-trust within yourself to float away from it and be like, damn. And that's like literally it, like, damn. I don't know, that's the best way I can describe it. And so how do we get onto this balance beam of vulnerability? How do you navigate it so that you don't ever fall off? First, stop worrying about falling off, because it's gonna happen. It's literally going to happen. Failure, rejection, pain, all inevitable. And I could do a whole other video on why you shouldn't fear fear and why it's quite literally just a teacher. And if you learn its steps and its dance, you begin to understand that fear is really just a really helpful emotion and mechanism to remind us of boundaries and desires. But when not regulated, it can go off the deep end a little bit and really suppress us. And you're not going to fear fear if you have self-love and self-trust. Without these two, empathy will collapse in on itself and become self-sacrifice. And when you truly trust yourself, the thing that will start to happen is being able to completely relinquish any control. And when you've released this idea that everything around you has to be in your control, you actually have more freedom to engage with life openly, because you're confident in your ability to respond and adapt and protect your peace with whatever is thrown at you. And this trust becomes the foundation where genuine empathy and authentic connection can flourish. And empathy, like all forms of love, has to flow in both directions. For all you anxious people out there, extending and self-sacrificing over and over and over again, and wearing yourself thin in hopes that being able to be a martyr and sending out all of this love that you have inside that you don't know what to do with, which is very beautiful, by the way. Like, I don't think a lot of anxious people get commended enough. And when I say anxious, I mean anxious attachment style, like people who are more prone to throwing out all their vulnerability on a plate, being a martyr, and kind of just bleeding with their heart open. I mean, even that imagery, I don't think you guys get enough credit on how much love you guys have pouring out of you. And I think it's really disheartening that those who, I don't want to say fearless, because overextending your compassion is out of fear of abandonment and out of fear of people not noticing your love. But I do think having that much passion and ambition to be seen and to be loved and to want to offer this like crazy feeling that you feel inside to someone else, that is commendable. That is so beautiful. And the only note I would have is to make sure you're giving that all back to yourself first, and that you are so satisfied in self before you do that, because then you'll finally find someone that matches your energy, and so you're not just being a martyr for love. And let me say this loud and clear: you do not need to be a martyr of love for it to be powerful. I think it's really sad that those who extend the most empathy are often ridiculed the most. At first glance, it kind of doesn't make any sense and it seems like the world is unfair, but I think there is a lot of problems with how people perceive self-love and love in this world. And lack of love causes evil. It causes neutral, wounded people to do very awful things. Unfortunately, that will always mean that there is a target on people who love openly and deeply. So like I said, to extend compassion endlessly in one direction without receiving anything back or giving anything to yourself is self-sacrifice. And to close yourself off entirely is literally self-abandonment. It's self-denial. It's denial of one's self, one's true form. Unless you have antisocial personality disorder or you're an actual psychopath, you are not avoidant. You are not completely turned off of connection. You are a human, and that is the best thing about you. There is nothing beautiful about never basking in love. There is nothing courageous about remaining one-dimensional for the sake of approval or comfortability. And once you understand these two sides of the spectrum and where fear manipulates each, you'll start to see that the balance lies in recognizing that everything is a mirror. What you perceive in others reflects your inner world. It's not about being empathetic to everyone in every situation. That is fucking stupid. That would mean that you're not being empathetic to yourself. And it's not about being closed off and never letting anyone in, because that means you are never letting yourself in. It's really, really about building up yourself and having this backed self-trust and self-sufficiency that you know that if you choose to be empathetic to this one person, you have boundaries, and you know that you will state those boundaries and that those boundaries are not going to be unnoticed. And why won't they be unnoticed? Because you fight for yourself, because you vouch for yourself, and you have no problem doing that. I think the most common one that people think of when it comes to being empathetic and being vulnerable without being manipulated is relationships. No one wants to put themselves out first, and no one wants to be rejected, and everyone wants to be the king of everyone's hearts. And what I will say to that is, have fun never being in love, never truly feeling that crazy feeling of secureness with another person, that raw human emotion of understanding, of knowing that they have you and they will look after you, but also knowing that even if they didn't, you still have someone looking after you, and that's yourself. And that true duet and dance of love can only happen when both of you have a really healthy attachment style, which comes from self-love and self-trust. I sound like a fucking broken record, but that's really what it is. And that doesn't mean that the relationship is always going to be fine and dandy, but it does mean that you'll be able to reach certain points of raw vulnerability with that person and with yourself that you wouldn't be able to without these key components of core. You shouldn't be worried about what you're met with, because you should be at a place in your life where it's okay and that you know it's going to be okay. Not that you don't feel hurt if you're rejected. That's human. If I was to go ask someone out right now who I really, really, really liked, and they basically said they didn't feel the same way about me, I would cry. And I would go home and I would need probably as long as I need to heal from that. But what I have removed from my life is that anxiety, and that I think it's honestly a fight or flight initial very human reaction to feeling scared and uncomfortable and fearful. It's literally fear. It doesn't mean that you remove the hurt and the pain and the sadness, but you remove that feeling in your stomach that you get, where you're I think I could die. I think that's the weirdest thing is you truly feel like you're gonna die. You want to try to remove that feeling, that really horrible guttural anxiety feeling that will keep you kind of static. And I remember getting a few texts sometimes and my head would start spinning, that type of stuff. It's that feeling doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to accompany the hurt and the pain. And then when that isn't there, navigating and guiding yourself through hurt and pain is a lot easier, because you're able to look at being hurt and sadness for just what it is. It's just sadness. You don't have to be afraid of it, and a lot of beautiful things can come out of sadness. And just like any emotion, you can't stay in it, you can't wallow in it, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned and a lot of fun lessons to be learned. Sadness might even be a little too fun to stay in, but that's a discussion for another time. But the biggest key to being empathetic without being manipulated is removing that anxiety around fear. It's a really strong knowing that you'll be okay. It's the same thing with rejection therapy or being told no. As soon as you start to do it over and over again, as soon as you start to understand that you are genuinely not going to die if that person isn't in your life, you are free. Do you understand how freeing that is? To only need yourself, and in a non-avoidant way. To be able to be sad and to mourn and grieve really beautiful and amazing people in your life, but know that you will be okay. That's that balance. Because it also then adds a level of love to that person that you are grieving, instead of it being a grievance of anxiety and fear and self-wallowing and being a martyr when no one else gives a fuck. It can turn into just this beautiful, like, oh my God, I am so sad because this person in my life was so incredible and I'll never be able to be with them again. I'll never be able to be graced with this. And that hurts me so much because I love them so much. And what's so beautiful about that is how much you love them. And it's something almost worth smiling about because you're not going to die, and look at how much love you have. That's so incredible to me, is how deeply humans can feel emotions and how destructive and brutal but also uplifting and powerful and ethereal emotions can be, and we feel them so physically, but we don't have to die. And I think being able to realize that these emotions can pass through you because you are just a vessel is a good form of detachment. Being able to fully feel it as it's passing through you and taking it in so then it can pass and it can leave. What gets people stuck is when they glob onto an emotion and then they make it their identity and they make it themselves, and they either don't feel it so it kind of burrows in you, and if it's not dealt with, it's going to stay in parts that you don't realize until much later at a much worse time. Or if you're noticing it too much and you're letting it overtake you and become you, you've lost you. You've lost the plot, basically. You have to be so fiery within knowing yourself and so sure and secure of yourself that being empathetic is not hurtful for you. And that can only start with countless tries over and over again. It only starts with not being fearful of fear. It starts with putting yourself out there and realizing that when you are rejected or you have bad shit happen to you or lose someone that's very important to you, that you're not going to die. That there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And as long as your heart is still beating, it is up to you to control your reality, to control your happiness, to control yourself. It's a lot of responsibility. Being a human has a lot of responsibility. It's really scary. It's really fucking painful sometimes. But I think being able to find yourself within all of that and to find the beauty within all of that is really the key to life. And you can either be like, fuck that, this shit corny as hell, and stay miserable, or you can take life for how it is, however unfair you think that it is, and then realize that, hey, maybe life really isn't that unfair, and it just is. And it's as fair and as unfair as I want it to be.